.com. I'm Bill Thompson on 105.9 FM and AM 630, Washington's Mall, WMAL.
Now, live from Tampa, Florida, the 2012 Republican National Convention with Brian and Brian, sponsored by the Media Research Center. 105.9 FM and AM 630, WMAL.
Good morning, everybody. It is 7:06 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk, and we are here in Tampa. We're going to be covering a lot of what's going on here for the rest of the week, but I think it's appropriate today to stop and pause and remember a great American who passed away over the weekend. I'm speaking about Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. I can recall as a young man, July 1969, staying up like many Americans to watch that on TV. One of the last people to actually tread on the moon is Harrison Schmitt, a former NASA astronaut, a former U.S. senator. He was the next to the last man to be on the moon, and joins us now here on WMA. How are you, Mr. Schmitt?
I'm well, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Well, talk to us about the man that you knew well, Neil Armstrong.
Neil was a true hero nationally and internationally, and in the classic sense. An intellectual, dedicated, and with the skills to, in my opinion, make him the absolutely best choice to be the first man to step on the moon and to carry on a tradition of achievement in the Apollo program.
He was a great pilot and more of an engineer, he said, than anything else. But there was something about his calm, reassuring demeanor that really was appropriate for this particular mission.
Well, there's no question about that. And I just, as far as I know and could ever tell, it was an inherent part of his character. But his years and years of test pilot experience almost certainly reinforced that. Also, people may not realize, because he did not do a lot of public speaking, but he did some, and it was very significant. And he performed at the highest level as a speaker and indeed as a historian. And as you know, he was also a professor of aeronautics. Right. Every speech I ever heard him give, or every talk, extemporaneous or otherwise, was filled with extensively researched material and delivered with remarkable clarity and insight and with good humor.
I'm talking with Harrison Schmitt, former NASA astronaut, former senator from New Mexico. Brian was talking about that day in July of 1969, what it was like to watch it. What was it like for you? Because, you know, it was harrowing for sure. What do you remember about that day?
Well, I had worked very closely with the Neil and the Apollo 11 crew. I was the mission scientist for his mission, and interfaced with the scientific community on a wide variety of things related to the mission. And, of course, though on a personal level, being good friends with them all, we were in mission control at the time of his landing, and it was exciting, and he demonstrated once again why he was the right person to be in charge of the lunar module.
Talk about that for a moment, because people may not remember. He landed on the lunar surface with about 30 seconds of fuel left in the LEM.
Well, they had run into a problem with the computer. The computer was giving off a number of alarms, and there was concern whether they should abort or not. And fortunately, a young man in mission control, Steve Bales, understood the problem completely, and said they should go ahead and proceed, because the computer was still doing everything that it was supposed to do. And when Neil then started to concentrate on landing, he realized that the trajectory was the automatic trajectory was taking him into an area of significant boulder concentration. So he just, as was planned anyway, he took over the flying of the vehicle and redesignated, we called it, to a point on beyond that boulder field, or where it was clear it would be a safe landing. But in doing so, and during all that, the fuel was being expended, and when he landed, we really don't know exactly how much fuel he had left, but the best estimates were about 20 seconds. Now, that doesn't sound like very much, and it wasn't, believe me, for the first landing on the moon.
I bet. Did you keep in touch with him? Do you know why he was so quiet and didn't do a lot of stuff in the public eye?
Neil felt very, very strong. Neil and I were close even in later years. He actually chaired the Aeronautics Committee of the NASA Advisory Council, which I chaired between 2005 and 2008. And we stayed in close, fairly close contact. He believed very, very strongly, and I totally agree with him, that the astronauts should not be the celebrities. The celebrities were the 450,000 Americans that concentrated a big chunk of their lives, 10 years or more, to making the Apollo program successful and Neil's landing successful and the other landings successful. And that they were the ones that should get the credit, not the astronauts. The astronauts were at the tip of the spear and obviously took a great risk in being there, but nevertheless that spear was being held by many, many others.
There has been a suggestion that perhaps there should be a state funeral for Neil Armstrong. From what I'm hearing you say, I think he might not like that idea.
That would be my guess. I do not know his wishes, but I would be surprised personally if Neil really would want that kind of attention.
All right. Dr. Schmitt, I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times, but I want to ask it anyway. What was it like on the moon? What was it like in space? And do you think about it like every day?
I have to admit that I do think about it every day.
Wow.
I do. I still do some writing on the subject and speaking on the subject. And it being where we were on the moon, I can't describe any other place. Was being in a deep mountain valley. It was called Taurus Littrow.
Right.
And the mountains on either side rose to 6,000 and 7,000 feet. The valley actually was deeper than the Grand Canyon of the Colorado.
Wow.
And to have that those brilliantly illuminated mountain walls against a black sky with the Earth hanging over the southwestern mountains was really one of the more remarkable, probably the most remarkable visual sight I have ever seen. And Neil felt very much the same way about even the plains of Taurus of Tranquility where he landed, and we really did have a great time talking about those things when we got together.
Two things. Did you ever wish that Gene Cernan had gone into the limb first so that you could have been the last guy?
No, that's not. That was not a realistic thing, the way things were designed, and I get to have the privilege of being the 12th man on the moon, following in Neil's footsteps.
And by the way, you are the person who took that iconic photo of the big blue marble, they call it, from that era.
Well, yes, and the only reason it is probably requested more than others, like ones that Neil took, is that we had a little better film. The Apollo 11 crew saw very much the same view of the Earth.
Wow. Well, it's an honor to have you on, and especially to have you on to talk about a great American hero, Neil Armstrong. Thank you very much. We're talking to Harrison Schmitt, former NASA astronaut, next to last man to be on the lunar surface, and a former U.S. Senator. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure, and my best for the morning and for the week for everybody.
Thank you very much.
7:15 on 105.9 FM and AM 630 WMAL.